The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find a link to Subhash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us. Welcome to our new sponsor.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. And this portion of the show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. Go to emailrevealer.com, got a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But also, too, you can catch your spouse cheating online. You send us their email address, and we'll take that email address, we'll chase it back to online dating websites and catch them cheating online. And also, too, while you got the holiday season here, I know everybody likes to locate long-lost relatives and old friends and loved ones and stuff like that. We can do that for you at emailrevealer.com, our people search. But give us some time, because you don't want to hit us up on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve and expect the results by the morning. We got with us back here a returning guest, Ted Rubinstein, legend, the great Ted Rubinstein, legendary, one of our greatest living researchers right now. Ted's a great guy. He contacts me all the time on Facebook. A little more than I want him to. No, just kidding. He contacts me all the time on Facebook, and we get into these great discussions, all different topics. He's always working on something great, cutting-edge stuff. He put us in touch with this guy, Michael Best from Glomar Disclosure, who's going to be doing a show on Awake Radio and all the other stations.
Disclosure.
Yeah, Glomar Disclosure, yeah. So Ted Rubinstein, if you don't know who he is, he's got a great long history, pedigree with the Mae Brussels and the Valerie Flint and Dave Emery. And now we have him here today, Ted Rubinstein. Hey, Ted, let me ask you a question real quick. If somebody wants to get a hold of you and send you a tip, how can they email you?
Ted at Albany Consort. It's all one word. Albany, like the city, and Consort is spelled CONSORT.com.
Ted at albanyconsort.com. Now, I got to confess, Ted, that was a trick, okay? I want everybody to email Ted Rubinstein and nag him about doing a show, okay, on Awake Radio. He promised me he's going to do a show, okay? And we got to get this guy hosting his own show and bringing us his research every week. So send him an email at ted at albanyconsort.com, okay? And nag him until we get this guy to do it. Okay, I hate to do it, Ted, but I had to. All right, brother, what do you got going on? You want to talk about two things, okay, that are on your mind. One is the helicopter pilot, Wickelsbaum. And then the other one...
Joseph Wickelsbaum.
Wickelsbaum.
Is the guy's name. And he owned a helicopter company which ferried high rollers to Trump casinos. And he's a convicted cocaine dealer.
All right.
And he got a reference from Trump in 1980, or else he was questioned about it in 1980. Anyway, this was right around the time that Wickelsbaum was getting out of jail. And Wickelsbaum has been denied a casino license.
No, I mean, Trump was.
Yeah, and I think you're the one who told me about his case being shopped to Trump's sister?
Here's what happened, okay? Winkelsbaum gets busted on his case. His case, for some reason, even though it was Florida and New Jersey, it was two different states. Somehow it wound up in New York in front of Donald Trump's sister. And she put out a notice saying, oh, my goodness, I cannot preside over this case because I fly in his helicopter every week and my kids fly in his helicopter and we know his family and we see him every weekend. There's no way I could judge this case impartially. So she put out a recommendation in her ruling that she, when she withdrew from the case, she puts out a glowing recommendation to the guy. And I got that from David K. Johnson. He's repeated that story many times. So that's what happened.
And then he got a light sentence from another judge.
Oh, he had a life sentence?
That the case then got sent to. But I don't know, because he's apparently been convicted in several different cases.
Right.
I'm going to refer now to the Smoking Gun article from March 1st of 16 that's entitled, Trump, Cocaine Dealer? What cocaine dealer? And it says in there that Winkelsbaum been barred from casinos due to narcotic and tax convictions. In 1980, Trump was questioned concerning his relationship with Winkelsbaum, who completed his sentence that year. He managed a helicopter company that carried high rollers to the Trump casinos. Trump authored a pre-sentencing letter praising the drug dealer. And before being convicted on cocaine trafficking, he had separate convictions for grand theft auto and embezzlement. He is now 74, living in Los Angeles. His main conviction was for distributing kilos of cocaine smuggled into Florida by two Colombian brothers. He could have gotten 18 years, but received only 3 due to cooperating with the DEA. Now, I don't think that case had anything. No, obviously, didn't have anything to do with the one that later involved Trump's sister. And it says another mafia associate was his enforcer. Trump claims that he has had almost no dealings with the guy recently, but acknowledged seeing Winkelsbaum walking through Trump Tower recently. Now, this I think you've also mentioned to me. At one point, Trump considered stashing Marlon Maples in Winkelsbaum's apartment, which was in Trump Towers, after Winkelsbaum reported to prison. This is according to Wayne Barrett's book. And both Winkelsbaum and his girlfriend bought condos or something in Trump Tower.
Yeah, and David K. Johnson says that they got some kind of sweetheart mortgage deal there that didn't have to get approved for their loan.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because now we're going to go into the background of these guys, Winkelsbaum and his pals.
Well, let me interrupt you for 1 second.
I know you know...
Wait, you know there's a connection to OJ in all this, right?
That's where we're getting to.
Go ahead, my friend.
That's Joey Ippolito.
Right, go.
Joey Ippolito. Okay. Joey Winkelsbaum was an old friend of Donald Aronow. Donald Aronow built cigarette boats down in North Miami. And he was murdered in 1987. And Joey Winkelsbaum was questioned in connection with his murder, but was not deemed a suspect.
Really?
Aronow not only sold these cigarette speedboats to the drug smugglers, but he also sold them to the DEA to catch the drug smugglers. And he had a multi-million-dollar contract with the government. And he was a very, very good friend of George Herbert Walker Bush, who I believe bought a cigarette boat from Aronow.
I wonder if he bought one of the DEA type or the smuggler type. You know? I wonder.
What's the difference?
I don't know.
And another person who bought a boat from Aronow and who may have been involved in financing Aronow's company was none other than Robert Vesco.
Wow.
So anyway, Aronow was murdered gangland style in Miami in 1987. There's 2 books on it. One of them is called Speed Kills. That's the later book. The one that was published, and it's the more controversial book that I'm going to be reading from, it's called Blue Thunder, How the Mafia Owned and Finally Murdered Cigarette Boat King Donald Aronow. By Thomas Burdick and Charlene Mitchell. I'll just say that the main suspects in the murder are some drug smugglers linked to the Lansky crowd. The main guy was Ben Kramer, and he's believed to have contracted a guy named Don Young. Ben Kramer is related to Lansky. The name Lansky just crops up throughout with all these people, because Lansky was, I think we might have mentioned before, he and his pals like James Caan and Alvin Malnick and all these people, they would hang out at Don Soffer's Turnberry Isle. That's where Donna Rice entrapped Gary Hart.
Wow.
That was on Don Soffer's boat. And also the cricket club was owned by Malnick. But Don Soffer was a friend of Aronow's. And as a lot of these drug smugglers are tied to Lansky. And it's the viewpoint of law enforcement officials that Lansky wasn't himself involved in drug smuggling, but he would finance drug deals or pay for the equipment that was used in drug deals. And both Vesco's name also would come up in that context. So it makes sense that Lansky would be, even though he was dead, and I don't know, he died about 93. But a lot of these drug traffickers are linked to the Lansky crowd, and also to the Genovese crime family, which we'll get to in a minute. So anyway, let me read a page out of Blue Thunder that will say how Joey Weichelsbaum ties into these other people. Okay. The authors are asking about people tied to this one organized crime figure named Frankie Vicerto, who a lot of these people, I guess I didn't mention, a lot of these people are involved in racing boats besides just, Aronow didn't just build boats, he raced boats. He was a very competitive guy, and a lot of these other people, including the drug smugglers, are involved in racing boats. Racing cars too, but that's another story.
Right.
Anyway, in this, the authors are asking questions about Joey Weichelsbaum's background. And they're questioning a guy from the Broward Organized Crime Department. Let's see. Joey Weichelsbaum, says John Sampson from Broward Organized Crime Division, who seems to know everyone with any connection to organized crime in the Miami area. He pauses. He likes to make me work for the information. I don't know. I think I've been getting a touch of Alzheimer's lately. Another pause. The last I heard of Joey Weichelsbaum, he was trying to take over ownership of the Jockey Club. Sampson says that one time a federal organized crime strike force was looking into him, but he didn't know what happened. He does recall one incident involving Joey's brother, Frank. The man was unloading a cargo container from Eastern Airlines in New Jersey. He had a heart attack. When the police went through his pockets, Frank Weichelsbaum name was there, and 200 pounds of marijuana in the cargo crate. How about Frankie Vicerto? Ever hear of him? I remember the name, Sampson says. He's a member of La Cosa Nostra, but I can't recall in what connection. Quote, Weichelsbaum seems to know Vicerto's business. Joey's no slouch then. No, Sampson says, I was convinced Joey was pretty big. Sampson tells me that Weichelsbaum was also friendly with another friend of Aronow's. Quote, he was real tight with Joey Ippolito.
Wow.
He explains. When they were racing off New Orleans and one of the crew got killed in a boat crash, Joey Weichelsbaum sent a plane to pick up Joey Ip and the rest of the crew. That's how tight they were. Joey Ip is second generation La Cosa Nostra, one of 9 children. His father was an associate of mob chieftain Simone Sam the Plumber di Cavalcanti. That's who the Sopranos were modeled after, by the way, the Cavalcanti crime family of Jersey. The man who won the bitter mafia struggle for control of the northern New Jersey construction industry back in the 50s. Now the plumber, who hates his nickname, is retired, and like many other old mafiosi, lives in Miami Beach. Joey Ippolito's older brother, Louis, is also mob. John Sampson investigated him at one time. We did a wiretap on Louis when I was at Dade working with Hollywood. Louis was in a scheme out of JFK where they were bringing in some shit, marijuana and hash. I asked if Joey had any other connections. I asked if Joey Ip had other connections. Quote, I was talking to a source one time that had information on a steel-hulled, empty 85-foot shrimper that they picked up with a load of dope on it, a load of grass. Now, the guy, the source, had done some good things for the feds, and he was saying that the boat was Meyer Lansky's because the people there were talking about it. And the people who were talking about the boat being Lansky's were guys that I know to be very Italian and very much involved with some offshore powerboat racers. One Joey Ippolito Jr. Okay, one last paragraph here. Samuelson comments that he's always suspected the mafia was involved in Florida's drug business, but that he couldn't get anyone to listen. He was also convinced that there was a connection between the drug activities of Florida organized crime and the New York families. Okay. So now Joey Ippolito, as you know, comes up in the O.J. Simpson case, possibly as a source for cocaine, but definitely because he hired A.C. Cowlings as his driver. Your turn.
What's it, my turn?
Yes.
Well, I don't know what to say. You know, one thing, did you come across Michael Jackson's name in all this? Because I know he took out, he had gotten a loan from the Lansky family's payday loan businesses down there in Florida.
Well, that's where that's Malnick. That's where Malnick was involved with Jackson. Malnick is the so-called heir to Meyer Lansky, although that's debatable. And, of course, hotly disputed by Malnick. Malnick did have his car blown up one day, so it pretty much indicated he was involved with gangland elements. But, yeah, the Michael Jackson connection to this comes through Alvin Malnick.
And what about when Debbie Wasserman Schultz just did this great deal for the payday loan industry down there? Do we know of any kind of connections or getting any money from these Malnick guy or any of these folks?
No.
No? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not saying it didn't. I've never heard that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I haven't heard it either, but I wonder if I stumbled on something.
Well, they're both Jewish, but no. All right. Okay.
Okay. I know, you know, it's an international conspiracy, right? You know that. That goes all the way back. Oh my God. I'm joking, people. Don't come after me. I need a break. Well, what about?
Okay, so I don't want to. So Ippolito. There's just a lot of strange circumstances, but it seemed that they let him out of jail, and then he hooked up with. He had a meeting with O.J., and then he got caught, quote unquote, but it was all seemed staged. I don't know. And then he got a pretty light sentence, and then he disappeared. And I think his family members are still popping up in drug busts here and there, but I'm not that up on what Ippolito's been up to in recent years.
Now, what about
he seems to have dropped off the radar. He's probably cooperated with the feds. That's what it looks like.
Right. Now, probably been trying to get O.J. to confess. Now, what about there was a thing about when O.J. and Al Cowlings were doing the slow-speed chase, that there's a theory that they were going to go down to Mexico and then they were going to be flying down to Florida, and that people down on those boats down there said, yeah, O.J.'s coming to dinner tonight, and they had all prepared for him. Have you heard that story?
No. Oh, I may have heard something like that. Now, there's a new Facebook group called O.J. is Innocent, and I tried to get them to discuss the organized crime connection without me having to prompt them all, but it didn't seem to go anywhere. But let me give you the name of this article that you're familiar with. That the main article that links Joey Ippolito to the O.J. Simpson case. And that was by Alex Constantine.
Right.
And you can find it on his website. And you can find it as a standalone booklet, I think, or online too. And it's also in a book I have in front of me, his first, I think it's his first book, called Virtual Government, CIA Mind Control Operations in America. And the article is entitled The Hollywood, Florida Mob Connection, the CIA, and O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with all of that Alex Constantine work. As a matter of fact, I remember when he was typing it out live in the Usenet groups when he was developing all the day by day, and he was doing all this. And then later on, went into the book and the website and all that kind of stuff. Now, but the thing is, as the years have gone by, how much of that stuff has been confirmed besides Constantine? Do we know?
What stuff?
All this stuff about O.J. and Ippolito and stuff like that. How much of it has been corroborated by third parties?
I would say very little.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but what I mean, remember that guy who was supposed to be stalking Pauline Barbieri?
Yes, Waz. His name was Waz. Yeah.
Like, I don't think any of that stuff was really corroborated.
No, that
and whether these other murders at the Met Saloon were connected or not.
Well, I can tell you this: the Waz story was corroborated because the cops had his diary and stuff like that. That's corroborated. Another thing that always popped out of me that you never hear about.
Okay, didn't that story implicate Kardashian?
Kardashian, yeah, the Kardashian was involved in a gambling operation. And I'll tell you something else, too. There was a guy, I remember there was a guy who was just, you could see, they had a little clip of him on the news. He was scared to death, and he was asking for immunity. And he said, this is about illegal gambling, this whole thing. And he was asking for immunity. He had his lawyers with him. Never heard anything about him since. I don't know what happened to that guy. And that was live during the trial. That was all going on. A lot of stuff went on in that trial that kind of just vanished away in a haze of confusion.
Okay. Now, let me read a page out of this article of Constantine's.
Okay.
The Ippolito Circle is chock-a-block with enforcers capable, with an assist from infiltrators in the LAPD of framing Simpson. Okay, but we're not going to get into all that. But anyway, Frankie Vicerdo. Now, remember, Frankie Vicerdo was a pal of both Aronow, the murdered Aronow, and of Joey Weichelsbaum. And he's also tied to Joey Ippolito. Frankie Vicerdo, for example. For Vicerdo, Joey's lead hitman was an original member of New York's Purple Gang, an offshoot of the Genovese family. The Purple Gang formed in the 70s, named after the bootleggers of Prohibition-era Detroit. A 1970 file on the gang, prepared by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, notes that they operated in Florida and may be using this state as a base of operations and were committing gangland murders in Florida. At the time, they ran the largest heroin smuggling operation in the country. Vicerdo, a suspect in the killing of Donald Aronow, is the leader of the Purple Gang. He is a terrorist and gun runner. In the past, he has worked with death squads in Guatemala, traditionally a bailiwick of the CIA. Okay, now,
hey,
yeah.
Let me give you a little anecdotal story that I got here. There was a story that Armand Della Croce was Ianello Della Croce's son. A lot of people said at the time, people suspected he was one of the shooters in the Castellano murder. Okay, but
was his first name Armand?
Yeah, Armand. Yeah. Now, he lived on Staten Island, and there was an incident because he had a federal firearms dealer's license. Okay, and there was an incident that made the papers that he was on a Trump helicopter going back and forth from Atlantic City, and he was waving around a MAC-10 machine gun on the helicopter. So one of the other helicopter patrons there, flipped out, and they called the cops, and the cops stopped him, and they never made an arrest because he had a federal firearms license to be in possession of a MAC-11 automatic machine gun. And I wonder if that was one of Wickelbaum's helicopters, because it all seems to fit.
So he had a federal license to have an automatic gun.
Yeah.
And he's tied to organized crime.
Yeah, his father.
And he gets a pass?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I got to tell you something. The office I worked out of in Brooklyn there, that was an organized crime. All the cases were organized crime defense. And that guy had an FFL license, and he was a gunsmith, and he did ballistics reports for court and stuff like that. It was guns all over the place.
And where was this?
In Brooklyn. Bay Ridge.
Oh. Have you heard that the Brooklyn coroner was controlled by organized crime, and that's why they wanted Dorothy Kilgallen to have the autopsy out of Manhattan and done in Brooklyn, where the mob controlled the coroner?
I never heard that. But weren't you the one that was telling me about who was that guy? Salvatore Reale.
Yes, Salvatore Reale supposedly being spotted at Mina Airport.
Oh, get the hell out of here! Wow. Okay, because he was
Brennickey, and I don't know whether it's true or not.
Yeah, he was a notoriously famous private investigator coming out of Brooklyn, who was a big shot, swaggering kind of guy, and got caught up in being a bag man doing bribes in New York City back in the early '80s. Very interesting that he would.
And was he involved with at JFK Airport?
I couldn't tell you exactly. I have never done any research or read about him. Only what I know about him is from experience, just hanging around these guys. And suddenly one day his name blasting all over a newspaper and giving everybody a bad reputation. Because we were such straight guys, man. We tried so hard to do the right thing all the time. And here's this guy gave us a bad name. It was really, really distressing. But anyway.
Okay, so now we're going to go back to Frankie Vicerdo.
Right.
Frankie, besides heading the Purple Gang, a group so vicious that it even intimidated mainstream mafia families, Vicerdo is suspected of being a terrorist and a large-scale gun runner. He is close friends with Jorge Antonio Zemeri Safi, an international terrorist and professional assassin. In 1975, Zemeri Safi and Vicerdo were observed at the Revere Indoor Gunnery Range in Pompano Beach, where they were firing a variety of high-powered weapons. The operator of the range overheard them discussing their joint travels to Guatemala around the time that a Guatemalan official was murdered. A weapon found at the site of the assassination was traced to Vicerdo.
Wow.
In 1979, U.S. Justice Organized Crime Strike Force intelligence brief notes that Zemeri Safi heads a paramilitary group in Guatemala which seeks to overthrow the present regime. He's currently being sought by Guatemalan authorities for murder and weapons offenses as a result of a 1975 shootout in which a Guatemalan G2 officer was killed. The prosecution of Zemeri Safi on U.S. gun charges was the first part of a multifaceted prosecutive effort by federal organized crime strike force members directed at hired killers utilized by La Cosa Nostra throughout the United States. Now, in the 70s, there was a whole series of gangland killings that involved .22 caliber weapons fired up close. A lot of informants were killed that way. And then a lot of just house cleaning. But anyway, a lot of these killings were believed to be carried out by the Purple Gang.
Very interesting.
Okay.
Let me give everybody a little update, because next week we have Doug Valentine coming back. You might recall he wrote the book about the Phoenix program, but Doug Valentine's coming back. One of his first interviews about his new book, might be the first, and the new book is called The CIA as Organized Crime. So that kind of fits into all this, to like what we're talking about tonight. Very interesting stuff.
By the way, let me just mention Alex Constantine's new book, because I just came across it accidentally, and I didn't see any publicity about it. It's called Jackals, The Stench of American Fascism. And it's like this other book. It's a whole collection of essays, not necessarily connected to each other, but it all involves parapolitics and, there's the secret government and all that.
Yeah, the book
mind control. He's really big on mind control.
Yeah, and he's convinced me about mind control. But the thing is about that book's about Trine Day, and I tried to get him on the show. I begged him to come on the show. He says that we had him booked to come on the show and that we blew him off, and but he's wrong. We never had a firm date to come on. I've begged him to come back, and either he won't forgive me over that, or there's some other reason he won't come on the show. I don't know. But
I've heard that he just doesn't like giving interviews. Like, I haven't tried it. In fact, I should. I should just try to see how much interviews he's got on YouTube or other platforms. Because, I've just been told he just doesn't do many interviews.
The publicist from TriNet came to me and said, hey, do you want to interview Alex Constantine? And I said, yes, I do, but we got this problem. He's mad at me, but tell him I'm sorry and ask him to beg him to forgive me because I'm a huge fan. And they came back, no, he won't do it. So he has a personal hatred of me.
Oh, ridiculous.
I know.
By the way, his first book came out on Feral House, not Trying Date. Anyway.
I know. Which again, to me, kind of raises a flag, because the stuff they're up to it. Process Publishing is Feral House.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Take a look into that. We got about a half hour.
I was reading something.
We got about
how long do we have?
A half hour, 25 minutes to a half hour left. So you want to move over to Zapruder? Because then we can get some of that Pizzagate stuff.
Yeah, let's do that now. Oh, wait, I do have it in front of me if I need to refer to it. Yeah. We're going to talk about certain aspects of so-called Pizzagate. Specifically, I want to refer to some of the New York coverage of it.
Before we get to that, now
the New York Times coverage. Go ahead.
Ted Rubinstein is a legend. Okay, a legendary, respected, old timer, elder statesman. Okay, in this field. What is your impression about Pizzagate? Do you have any kind of doubt at all?
I have doubts about what it reveals, but I don't have any doubts that these people are perverse, let's say, in some way.
Okay.
I think in some ways I agree with the idea that they're just trying to rub it in our face about how edgy they are, and I was reading one yesterday about how this is all about the liberals' idea that children should be exposed to sexuality. And this guy even was blaming it on George Carlin. And that part really bugged me. I'd never heard George Carlin suggested that, you should expose children to all this, sexual content or sexual, bawdiness or dirty jokes or whatever, the dirty words. I mean, George Carlin certainly wasn't talking about children, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm going to
talk about them rubbing it in our face. About them rubbing it into our face, there is an element to that black magic, which I kind of think that what's a level of going on here is that they want to rub it in your face. That's part of it. That it has to be known what they're doing in order for them to get the kind of power that they need from it.
Well, I've heard that. See, I don't know about that. That's kind of a little far out there for me.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know whether how many or if any of these people are involved in any child sex trafficking rings. And I think, these Pizzagate investigators get in trouble when they make that assumption based on what we have in front of them. That's why I kind of like this article that I saw in the New York Times, because I was really down on the New York Times coverage of the story. But finally, there's two developments that I want to discuss, one of which was the fact that there's an article called "There Are No Child Sex Slaves at My Local Pizza Parlor," which ran in the Sunday Review section of the New York Times on the 10th. And the author of this piece is none other than Alexandra Zapruder, daughter of Abe Zapruder, who filmed the JFK assassination on that infamous day. And the daughter, Alexandra, has come out with a book just recently about being the daughter of the maker of the most famous piece of film in the world, amateur film in the world, or news film in the world. And so anyway, this article is basically poo-pooing the Pizzagate allegations and talking about her own experience with conspiracy theories that are unfounded and so-called fake news. I'll read one paragraph here. I've seen my share of conspiracy theories. Oh, it was her grandfather. I misstated that. My grandfather, who accidentally took a home movie of President John F. Kennedy's assassination, now known as the Zapruder film, was implicated in some of the most delusional stories about that event. He had colluded with the CIA to allow his film to be altered just days before the assassination. He had secret ties to Lee Harvey Oswald through a co-worker who later married Oswald's close friend. And, wait for it, he was the one who pulled the trigger through an elaborate gun-as-camera mechanism at the bidding of the Jewish mafia. I'll just read one more, two more paragraphs. The government's failure, in the historian Art Simon's words, to come up with a, quote, coherent and believable account of the assassination, unquote, left many gaps to be filled, while early assassination researchers performed a valuable function by making important information public. Later conspiracy theorists relied on association and innuendo and cherry-picked details to build increasingly wild narratives. If one outcome of Kennedy's assassination was a loss of trust in government and the news media, we have now entered an era in which such suspicions have mushroomed into something far more dangerous, a rupture in the very idea of shared truth. Okay. So, anyway, it's kind of interesting that through the personage of Alexander Zapruder, one can say that now the Kennedy assassination conspiracy theory has been joined with Pizzagate, but only to this respect.
Now, is she a regular columnist there in that weekend magazine?
No, I think this is like a guest opinion that appeared in the Sunday Review, which publishes things from people that are not regular columnists.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And I think this has something to do with the fact that she's coming out with this book just at this time.
Right. Okay.
Which I'm sure is reviewed in the New York Times. Unlike all the conspiracy books that the New York Times takes great pains to avoid ever reviewing, just like all the other mainstream papers do. But anyway, the other article, and I wish I had this in front of me. I think it was on the 8th, but anyway, it was last week in the New York Times. They had an article which actually went into some of the Pizzagate allegations, some of the pictures, some of the Instagrams, and some of the emails that were written to or from Podesta, and they had to do with handkerchiefs and pizza-related maps that, they didn't seem to fit the context of what the emails were about.
Right.
And finally, the New York Times prints that stuff. They don't rebut it. They just leave it hanging out there. But at least they've done that much.
Now, who was the author of that reporting? Do we know?
I don't have that guy's name in front of me. I do know that at this point they have several people writing about it, because if you remember, the first person they had writing about it was this woman named Cecilia Kang. She's a technology writer, and then her name actually turned up in the Podesta emails. And she wrote this really dismissive article that didn't talk about any specific facts. It was just a total attack piece with nothing to really rebut anything. And then I think she wrote a subsequent piece, and then after that they put in a couple of other people on it. Various aspects of it, because it all fits into this general fake news narrative that's so important. And also with the Russian hacking. These things, in some ways, they're all of a piece.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a question now, because you're an old guy like me, right? Now, I've never seen a post-election, a sitting president and the losing campaign try to discredit the incoming president in such a way, even bringing in the Russians. And what are you making of all this, man? What are you seeing?
Well, I think it's partly because it's Trump and because he's so beyond the pale. But I also think that the neocons and the neoliberals, the ISIS enemy wasn't enough, and so they had to bring back the Russian bear as a threat, and not only in Syria and the Ukraine, but now most intently with the with the cyber hacking and the claim that they affected the election through Julian Assange, because Julian Assange has such a visceral hatred for Hillary Clinton that he was willing to help the Russians put Trump in power. But there's been various articles debunking aspects of this whole narrative, and also pointing out, this was from Time magazine 20 years ago, the United States interfered or meddled in the Russian election to tilt it towards Yeltsin. So we have, again, the pot calling the kettle black, even on the face of it. So even if the allegation is true that the Russians are doing it, we've meddled in their elections. That's the point of that. But there's also indications that the breadcrumbs that lead to Russia being involved are so blatant that the Russians would have been smarter than to do this. Apparently, there's one name that's left on the electronic traces that is the name of the guy who started the KGB. Now, why would a Russian hacker use a state actor use the name of someone who's going to be traced to the Russian KGB in its early history? So that doesn't make sense. So, and it's very easy to make it look like the hacking is coming from one place when it's really coming from another.
Well, there was an Assange interview.
Anyway, I'm not an expert in this. I don't,
right.
It's way out of my field.
No, but you're a wise guy, and the thing is a wise man. Assange just came out with an interview, I believe it was just yesterday, in the last 48 hours, saying, no, this didn't even come from a hack. And the questioner was saying, didn't this come, because there's an article that came out. A guy that used to work for WikiLeaks just came out with an interview saying that, no, this was hand-delivered in the woods in D.C., that this didn't come from a Russian hack. It didn't come that way. It came from someone who worked within the DNC, which is what I think. I think it's
the guy. Remember the guy who was murdered?
Right.
The guy who was murdered, and they kept asking Assange, why would you be putting up a reward for this guy if he wasn't one of your sources? And then I'm not going to answer that question.
Yeah, right. Seth. So, his name was Seth something.
There is the question. There is the question of Assange's credibility.
Yeah.
But and I see him as a guy with agenda, but I don't see him as a liar. But a lot of people seem to. A lot of people won't take his word on anything.
Now, okay, just another quick question for you. These establishment, Clintons and Obama, these establishment types, and the neocons and the neoliberals, what would they have a complaint if Trump is turning the foreign policy over to Exxon and Mobil, and he's turning over domestic policy to Goldman Sachs and a bunch of generals? What would their objection to that be? It's not like he's really an outsider who's trying to do anything, except to hijack money for himself.
You've just raised such a good question that I can't answer it. I think it's just his perceived uncontrollability and independence. And so they're thinking, well, even though some of these appointments might be to their liking, they're still, wary of him, and they're still wondering what he might do once he gets in there. And I think they're especially worried about this Russian situation. And I just don't think we need to be I don't think we should be coddling a guy like Putin, but I certainly don't think we should be poking the Russian bear all over again. Maybe
because they see that Trump has no problem stealing everything that's not nailed down, and he's going to steal more than they think he deserves. Especially if he has a personal connection, he makes a personal deal with Russia and Putin to open up all that oil, and cut out all that stuff in the future. Who knows? Maybe Trump is stealing more than they want him to steal.
Well, they still have. In no way have they gotten anywhere towards resolving these colossal conflicts of interest that he has with his businesses.
And what's the
What
stop?
do you do? Wait till the last minute on all this stuff?
Well, what's to motivate him to do it? All he has to do is hold up a little shiny ball, and everyone runs over there and goes, looks at that. Well, he's stealing more on the other side. They can't keep up with that guy. That guy's a master con man. They're not going to keep up with Donald Trump and his family. Those fast-talking sons, man. You ask him a question.
If he doesn't do something and he's making money while he's hand over fist while he's president, won't that arguably be grounds for impeachment? I don't know. This is all uncharted territory.
I know, man. What are we going to do? Got to get out of here. It's time to go. Got to get out of here, man. There
was one artist that actually left the country because Trump got in. I forget which guy it was. I forget. Comedian, maybe. He's a comedian.
Well, look at this guy, Richard Haskell,
anyway.
man. I just had him on the show. He left the country. He's down in Venezuela or something like that, or Costa Rica. Hey, what do you make of this thing? Kurt Richard Haskell, the guy who was on the plane with the underwear bomber or the shoe bomber or something like that, and he ratted him out.
What about him? I know that, what's her name? Rebecca Roth doesn't like him.
Yeah, Rebecca Roth. What do you make of her? Because I was just offered an interview with her, and then I find out that now she's accusing my producer of being a spy or something. What do you make of Rebecca Roth?
I'm confused about her. Okay. I don't trust all her information. And then this is, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I read somewhere that she says she's 65, and yet you look at her on YouTube, she looks half that age.
Well, you know all the stuff that's not her real...
Why would you say you were older than you are?
Well, you know that's not her real name, right?
I know that's not her real name. Yeah. Right, I understand that. But they show the person... Yeah. That she is, and she sure doesn't look 65 to me.
Well, the other issue too is her fans are like they're fanatics, and so I got enough people stalking me. Now, what about the great Sheriff Joe Arpaio? Here's a man, a Nazi for your own heart, right? What more of a fascist could we have than Sheriff Joe Arpaio? Now, but yesterday, did you catch that news conference yesterday?
No, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, check it out, man.
I know something about birther. He's reviving the birther thing.
He's not giving up, man. The birth certificate. They had two forensic documents examiners do a press conference yesterday, and I only caught the second half of it. And I got to tell you, their work is very impressive. There is something with that document. The one that the PDF that the that the Obama put out.
But it's a psyop because I've heard that too, that if you look at the long form document that they handed out a couple of years ago, that there was transparent anomalies in it. But nevertheless, if anyone does what Joe Arpaio did yesterday, they're definitely being dismissed as kooks because even Trump himself he's given that up, right? So. Yeah. So I don't care what their evidence is. I mean, they're really going to have a tough time trying to sell it.
I got a theory about that. Trump, if you notice, he came out and said, I believe he didn't say anything about the birth certificate being a forgery. What he came out and said is, I believe that he's an American. And he did that right after his very first intelligence briefing. And if I know Trump, I think the first question he went in there and said, okay, guys, how did this Muslim Nigerian sneak in here past you guys? And they told him, he's a CIA creation. He's one of us, is what I think. And that's why Trump doesn't believe anything coming out of the CIA right now. He says, the Obama CIA? I don't believe any of those guys.
Do you think Trump knows about the Obama connection to Business International?
I don't know. What is the Obama connection to Business International? I do not know.
Well, they're the first company that hired Obama when he got out of law school.
And you can't find that anywhere, yeah.
They're featured prominently in Carl Oglesby's book, Ravens in the Wind, as an outfit that tried to co-opt SDS back in the early 60s.
Wow.
And that they all assumed that this was coming from this company must have been doing this. They were doing this on behalf of the CIA. And then this company surfaces later with the relation to Obama. And I don't know how much Wayne Madsen, I presume Wayne Madsen, that's part of Wayne Madsen's scenario, but I haven't looked at it closely.
And then how do you land? You think that Obama's CIA?
I lean in that direction, yeah.
It would explain the shoddy paperwork.
It would explain to me why, for example, this would probably mean he would cozy with the FBI. He's not going to pardon Leonard Peltier. That has nothing to do with the CIA, but it just shows that he really, when it comes to the important stuff that the left would want to see him do, or when it comes to a real blow for social justice would be freeing Leonard Peltier, but he won't do it.
Yeah, I had his son on. I had his son on the show.
His aversion to transparency, it reflects his coziness with the national security state to some extent, or having made a deal
Yeah, I had Leonard
get along to
Peltier,
go along. Yeah,
I had Peltier's son on the show, and you're right. This is the last hope. This is the last hope we could ever get Peltier out of prison. He's like almost 80 years old, and he took a beating in there just recently too. You know, it's not a young man's game. Bad health, diabetes, all kinds of stuff, and you're right, man. It's a sin. And you heard the story about how the Clintons were gonna pardon him. And the FBI held a protest out in front of the White House where 200 FBI agents showed up to protest. And supposedly, they said, we'll rat you out with everything we know if you give up, if you let Peltier go.
Okay, now I have pulled up, I'm not going to read this, but I have pulled up this New York Times story that I was referencing from December 10th. They actually have 3 writers on it, including that one I mentioned, Cecilia Kang. So this article is called Dissecting the Pizzagate Conspiracy Theories by Gregory Aish, John Huang, and Cecilia Kang. And, you know, as I say, I recommend it because it finally does give you details that most of the mainstream media avoided giving you because they just wanted to dismiss it all as fake news with nothing to it. And yet if you read this article, you'll see that, well, some of the stuff is puzzling to say the least.
Now, is there anything they're leaving out that you've seen from Reddit and 4chan and stuff?
Well, they go into this thing about the Madeleine McCann kidnapping.
Oh, really?
From Portugal?
Yeah, because, you know, that case has been reopened. Scotland Yard really has reopened that case. They announced it, for real. Based on new information.
In the wake of these allegations?
There was no publication that I've read makes the direct connection, but it says that they reopened it due to new information.
There may be stuff here that's popped up that they've left out here. It wouldn't surprise me. And in fact, there's sort of in the back of my mind there was something I wanted to. Maybe we just was the Alexander's approved thing. Maybe that was it. But there wasn't one other thing. But that's not going to come to me. But anyway, it's good to see that, you know, at least some of the information is coming out in the newspaper of record.
Yeah, get it on record.
The symbols. I don't know what to make of the symbols. I tend to avoid them because some of them are so sort of generic looking. Like, okay, you unfurl a paper clip, and then you fold it in another way so that it makes little inverted triangles, and then that becomes the symbol for boy lover. Well, you know, I just can't go along with that.
Yeah, I know. And I saw some guy did this work on all the posters, because they're all done by the same artist. The posters promoting the musicians that appear there. And there is a theme, you know.
Oh, some of that is sick. Like, what about the one that says sex stains? Is that for children too?
Well, there's a whole theme in these things. Of tunnels is one, and another one of dead babies. You can see the outlines of and it's in every picture of dead infants and of tunnels and things going into tunnels. So there is a pattern with this artist who has a fascination of embedding dead babies and tunnels in these posters for these artists. And there's that recording too where they had one of these performance artists where she's saying that, you know, sex with little boys is a preference. Someone in the audience is joking out that he likes sex with little boys, and then the performance artist goes on to say, yeah, well, it's a preference. You know, so it's not like this is a family-friendly place like they're trying to portray, even if you give them every benefit of the doubt.
Right.
I'm not bringing my kid to that place.
And yet, we're supposed to be, I don't know, tolerant, but we're supposed to see that this is just art. Yeah. This is nothing really that controversial. I don't know what we're supposed to think, but, you know, I can't go along with the moral narrative here. And the idea that these people are so put upon and terrorized. Oh, and I heard, did you hear the interview with David Brock where he breaks down crying?
No, I did not see that. No.
And that's another thing. The guy who was interviewing him is this guy who admitted in some of his own emails that he's a self-described hack who'll do anything that people tell him to.
Right, I saw that, yeah.
And then he got hired by the New York Times, and he's doing this interview with Brock, where Brock breaks down and cries about his pal, Elefantis. And you, just listening to where he cried and recovered right away, it just sounded so phony.
Yeah, Elefantis can't put on a good face either, man. There's an impromptu press conference the night of the shooting, and he just can't pull it off. But if you notice, though, they're talking about this one gunshot, a discharge of a firearm, a public discharge of a firearm, which is what the crime is. I don't know what he's being charged with. But that kind of stuff happens all the time, and every day. But they're reporting on it every single day, first thing in the morning, and several stories on different channels at night.
Well, the New York Times did an interview with him, too, in which he's talking about how he doesn't like this term fake news because it goes too far. Not everything is fake. It's like even this psycho is saying the same thing we are, but I'm not convinced. I don't know what to make of him, but I just think it was an interesting interview with him.
Ted, we're out of time. We're out of time, my friend.
All right.
You got to come back. But more importantly, we got to get you to do a show because, it's important. I'm going to do a whole thing tonight later on in the after show talking about how it's really important that we have sober elder statesmen like yourself. You have a responsibility to do it. I'm calling you on it, okay? So if anybody out there wants to help produce Ted because he's nervous about tape recording and all kind of stuff, I know we have a lot of technical guys out there. Get a hold of me. And let's put this together, man. We need you, okay?
All right.
Okay. Everybody
This was fun.
Everybody email him at Ted at... Okay, I gave an email before. But Ted Rubinstein, thank you so much, my friend. Okay, God bless you.
All right.